just do the same presentation you did last year. I said, okay, well, I can do that, that's no problem. Then I got to thinking about it and I realized that people see the same thing, they tend to go to sleep. So for those of you who have been here before, I really didn't want to put you to sleep. So I thought, well, if I can show a pot of gold and maybe some Irish luck, since it's Las Vegas, maybe I can have people pay attention. Well, I can't really do that, but I can give you some teasers to some new features that Pinpoint has, and I'll sprinkle them throughout the presentation, and hopefully that'll be enough to keep you awake. So first, there are some enhanced graphical capabilities, and that leads to increased flexibility of really what we can show from a management summary of the things, and also what we can how we can analyze the data. Then there's faster load times, which leads to an increase in productivity. And finally, there are more native metrics, which leads to pushing the easy button. So I'll try to address each of those as we go on. But now back to the basic presentation. So there are all types of different dashboards. They measure different things. But most useful dashboards show trends. So you want to be able to show trends. The problem we had was, how do you put different disjoint pieces of a design together? We have different pieces such as timing, area, power, signal integrity, and more importantly, we have a variety of knowledge that tries to tap those different pieces. We have architects, logic designers, and physical designers. And in addition to that, we have a very geographical, diverse environment where there's some in San Diego, there's some in India, and there's some in Austin. So we really wanted a tool to put all these things together, and for us, that answer was Pinpoint. So why did we choose Pinpoint? Well, there were three features that Pinpoint had that was really attractive to us. First was it was an integrated web-based dashboard, which really covered all the aspects of the design. So we could look at synthesis, place and route, all the way through our end sign-off, all within one environment. Second, it had very good graphical analysis capabilities and there was a very quick ability to transition from a high-level view of what those metrics were to a much more detailed view. So this allows you to spot outliers quickly and then zoom into the problem area for the analysis of those outliers. And finally, perhaps the biggest thing that it had was a linking to the physical databases. This is something that we hadn't seen before, in that you could really take your paths that you have with timing analysis, and then you could map those directly onto the physical database that you're seeing, all without bringing up the physical design tools. And that way, architects and logic designers, other people who aren't familiar with the tools, can do it, and if they can use Google Maps and Google browsers, they can use this tool. So the question might be asked, why didn't we develop an internal solution? Well, there's significant resources involved in doing this, and Qualcomm's really a design company and not a CAD company. And the second is, and as I think you'll see over the course of this presentation, is we really are able to leverage the commercial solution by gaining benefits that the tool vendor enhances it from over time without us having to do that ourselves. So this is a high-level project overview page, which shows the synthesis view. You get, in our case, we develop different DSP cores, so we show the different DSP cores on this. If you were a chip level team, you would actually, this represents one chip, and then you could show the individual pieces of that chip. From the high-level project overview page, it's also very configurable depending on what your needs are. As you look across the top, you can show different flow steps and different tools. You can show different metrics. You can show it who it's tracked or owned by. You can show how many blocks you want to track, and you can also show the numbers that you want to show. The other thing that was very attractive to us was, as I was saying, this wraps up all our different tools into one product. So we had tools that had different reports in different formats. This was able to read all of those different formats and put it in one unified format. So it didn't matter if we were in synthesis, in place and route, or in timing, or which place and route tool we were in. We could read those in, the view was the same, it looked the same to anybody who was looking at it. And finally, you can look and sort these however you want it. There's some people, depending on who you are, you may be interested in some blocks or some metrics instead of others. And by simply pulling it on a pull down and looking at that, you can find out very quickly which ones you're interested in. So as I was talking about, there's interactive metric tracking, and what these enable you to do is see very high-level trends, and you can look at it and spot outliers. And if you look at the bottom one that's highlighted there, you obviously see an outlier there. So you can then click on that and zoom down into the details. Now this is one of the areas where the Pinpoint team from Dassault enhanced their graphic capabilities and really worked with us to provide solutions that we felt would benefit not only us but others. The first was a histogram. When you're looking at timing analysis, a lot of people look at WNS and TNS, but that really doesn't tell the whole story. What you want to look at, especially from an analysis viewpoint, is a histogram and how close you are to failing. And this shows, sort of depending on what the tail of your graph looks like, it shows how likely you really are to being able to fall off a cliff of paths when you're actually on silicon. The second thing they did was they made the metric tracking very selective. So now we could basically take any one of our metrics and graph it across time. And you could choose how many you wanted to graph. You could choose which ones you wanted to graph against. So both of these really, and each of these metrics are also still, you can zoom into any particular area. You can click on either one of these buttons and it will zoom you down into the details of those. So if you look at an outlier, that previous outlier it showed where there was a high spike in WNS, we can look at this one and see, well, the bulk of the outliers in this more detailed view are caused by only one corner. And then it turns out in this case, we didn't have bad timing in the corner, we just had bad constraints. So we could go in there and fix those constraints. So the other thing you can do now is once you get down to that level, you can zoom a level further down and zoom into the actual timing reports themselves. And these are the reports exactly as you would see them in the tool. So you have full access to all of the details of the path to really look at exactly where the problem may lie along the course of the path. And then with a single click, you can take that timing path and then map it to a layout view that's on it and see how that timing path looks physically. Because if you're just looking at a timing report, that may not tell you anything. But if you look at the actual physical view, you can see, is it because it's, in this case, it's routing all the way down to the chip and all the way back. Well, that one should be easily solved if we can just partition things and get them in the right areas. You can also then zoom down, as I was saying, it's a Google Map-like function where you can zoom down all the way into the details, and then you can also zoom all the way out and highlight all of the critical paths that you may see. So this kind of gives you an overview of, you have a whole bunch of critical paths and you want to say, are they all in one sort of area or are they geographically diverse across my layout? So this will allow you to easily get a graphical view or a physical view of what that looks like. Now, as we were doing this, one of the keys to using Pinpoint is really the speed at which you could do this. You could go through these and click on the views and all of it worked very quickly. The problem we ran into lately as we started pouring more and more data into it and started trying to get reports that were much bigger, the speed of accessing this data slowed down. So we worked very closely with the Pinpoint team, and I won't go into the details of how they solved it, but eventually they got us trucking on down the road at the speed that we desired. So you can also see different views of the data depending on who you are and what you're looking for. So this is a traditional sorting that's used by physical designers where they want to sort by worst negative slack. So you can sort on the first column there. The Second column, if you're an architect and looking at it and you really want to say, where are my real problem paths? You don't really care so much about the negative slack, but you want to care about paths that have high gate counts, because those are probably things that you may need to repartition the architecture more to solve. Finally, you can get, if you have a whole lot of paths, you can get a filtered view of those paths by clicking on a button that allows automatic filtering, and it can filter those paths down into a more concise view where it eliminates bus paths and other such things. There's also a table at the top where if you're a designer for a particular block within a set of timing reports, for instance, in our case, we have a core, but then we have a instruction unit within that core, and if you're the instruction unit designer, you can now look in that block and just search for instruction unit paths. Paths that those have a specific name, you can search for those, and that will come up then with only the paths that are of interest to you, and you don't have to worry about the other paths that you may not care about. But the real power of Pinpoint, as I said earlier, is linking to layout-based overlays in the physical database. So what this allows us to do is different things, not only showing the timing reports on it, but we can highlight the instances and highlight them by different major blocks and really see, and architects love this kind of thing because number one, they don't have to go and ask a physical designer to bring up the tool and see how things are placed. They can go and just enter their block units that they're interested in, see where they're blocked and say, hey, you know, this really doesn't make sense from our architectural level, you should move this over here. And so we work very closely with our architects as they sort through this to get the optimal layout and the optimal cell placement of the different major groups. So the other thing you can do is, as you see these physical groups, then you can overlay the critical paths on top of them. This allows you to, again, get a view of where your paths are going between different blocks, if they're going between multiple units or not, and if one unit is spread out more than it should be and the critical path is spread out, well then you can use some constraints to try to improve that. There's also the ability to take other sorts of overlays. In this case, we have an IR drop map overlay, and what you want to really see is normally how people do it is they establish a budget for IR drop and they establish a budget for timing, but there's really no good way of tying those two together. Well, this tool allows you to tie those two together because it allows you to show an IR drop map overview and show the different hotspots, and then over the hotspots you can overlay the critical paths and see, in this case, the critical path doesn't overlap with those hotspots. However, if you look at other cases, you may have a critical path that actually goes through a hotspot. In that case, what you can do is you can zoom down into the hotspot area, zoom all the way down into the detailed cell view, and it can actually then pinpoint the exact instance which is in the critical path. This then you can go and look at that instance and say, is it because that instance is drawing too much power? Is it because the power grid there isn't hooked up right? But you can go and address it. And this is all done without accessing any of the actual physical design tools or the Red Hawk tools, which are coming from two different companies, but they're all tied into now this one tool that can be accessed. So the other thing you can do is, because in our case we have a physical design team and then we have a power team and a power analysis team, well, we can now click on a button when we're down here, send this link to them, and by clicking on that link, they can go to the exact spot where we're at in the tool and where they see the problem. The beauty of this is also that provides a starting point, but that doesn't limit them. So if we send them a snippet in an email, all they see is that snippet. If we send them this, they see the particular problem, but then they can zoom out or go and search for different things that may be of interest to them or show a way of how they see the problem differently. So it provides a starting point, but it also provides the flexibility to look at different areas. So the other big thing that Pinpoint has is it has the ability to do lots of different customizations. We've worked on these a lot in showing different timing views, and if you look at this timing view, what we typically have in our core is we over-constrain our IOs on our core. So if we look at from a high level, the TNS, WNS, and NFE, it looks really bad, and it looks always the same. And so, you know, a manager looking at this says, Dwight, you're really not doing your job because nothing's improving. So what we did is then you can look at a main clock and say, well, look at the main clock, the clock that we really care about, and then look at the timing associated with that. And that gives us a more realistic view of what the timing is and what the paths that we really care about are. So the other thing you can do is it allows you, we use something called PD regressions that run on a regular basis, and people always want to know, well, what's the status of the regressions and where is each tool? Well, each one of these arrows is actually an indication of the status of the tool as it progresses through different steps. So you know which step the flow is at, you know whether it passed or failed, and if it failed, you'll see there's a little icon there that shows up as an eye. Well, you can click on that I button and actually tell you the reason and the error that it failed. So this is all stuff that we worked with the Pinpoint team to add in, but all the hooks were already there, and we were just able to tie into those hooks to provide the information that we want. So there were also a series of future enhancements that last year when I talked, I said there's lots of things we still wanted to do with Pinpoint. We wanted to do additional overlays. We had a lot of enhanced graphic capabilities. We had additional metric tracking with transition violations and max cap violations. And then we had a bunch of additional customization of metrics such as number of logic gates, number of buffers, number of cells, number of large RC delays, all of these things which would allow us to analyze the data better. Well, over the course of the year, we're still working on the additional overlays. Those are actually take the most time and involve us coordinating most groups. So we're making some progress on that. However, I'm happy to report all of the other metrics we've actually now integrated to the tool and are now done and in place. So we really, our partnership with the Pinpoint folks has really, in my view, been outstanding to allow us to get the kind of support we needed to enhance the tool on an ongoing basis. So in the end, the summary is Pinpoint really helps us put the pieces of the puzzle together.